I'm Mark Rhodes with New View Strategies. We originally presented this session at the User Group Summit North America 2020, and now we want to share our insights and experiences with you. Enjoy!
Welcome to our session today. It is What Story is Your Data Telling You? My name is Kim Congleton, and I am presenting today with Belinda Allen.
Hi, Kim. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Belinda. We're going to do some quick introductions first for everybody. Belinda, I'll let you go first.
Hi, everybody. I am a Microsoft MVP for the data platform, specifically Power BI. I do training, and I'm with a company, my own company, Smith & Allen Consulting, and I am a newly minted Power Platform All-Star. So I'm super excited about that. That's a little bit about me.
And congratulations, Belinda, on the All-Star. That's
Thank you.
Pretty exciting news.
It is very exciting news, and I'm really happy to put that little award next to my GPUG All-Star, my GPUG All-Star. So, and actually, I guess I should have mentioned that I do have about almost 30 years of experience in the ERP world as well.
Well, so I have about 25 years experience. We're not going to do the math when it comes to my age, but let's just say I started when I was 10. I am an owner at New View Strategies, and we specialize in training and business process consulting. I am a NAVUG All-Star. I got mine last year, so that is pretty exciting with the user group. And you'll see my email right there if you have any questions after viewing this session.
We started in third grade, didn't we? We were both in third grade, yeah.
What's that?
We both started in third grade together.
We did for sure. Anyway, so just wanted to go through kind of a little bit of where this session falls. So my world is a lot of distribution and warehousing and BC and NAV. And Belinda, you want to talk a little bit about your background as well?
Yep. So again, my ERP background goes back to GP, but I've done a lot with distribution. And so I have a real strong area there. And I've always been someone who has worked on reporting with distribution. So it was a natural fit for me to take my love of Power BI and work in the distribution world as well, which puts that little happy spot in the middle where this session is, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's been fun. This is kind of a new thing. We've gotten to work on some projects together, and I think we both bring a lot of experience from those different areas, and kind of, you know, getting into that circle and talking about some of these things has been a lot of fun to go through.
I have to say, I appreciate all the knowledge you've shared with me. I've learned a lot about BC from you. So it's been really fun. So I'm excited I have the opportunity to share what I've learned with you, with everyone today.
Thanks. All right, let's jump into it. So you'll notice the slide says vendor dashboard coming soon. When we gave the original session, we asked the group to vote on what type of dashboard they would like Belinda to come up with. And the winning one was a vendor dashboard. So you're going to see a little bit of a preview as we go through the session. And more information will be coming soon on this. Belinda, did you want to add a little bit there?
Well, yeah, so we're going to be talking about how you can build one piece of it today. But yeah, I'm super excited about some of the elements that we have. And the video of creating this dashboard is going to even include creating the web services. So it's going to be a start to finish. So if you've never used Power BI before, you should be able to build everything that you're going to build. I don't get into full detail of the history of Power BI or all the elements of Power BI. It's going to be more about do this, do this, do this, but you'll be able to build something yourself. Yeah, so it should be fun.
I'm excited to see it. All right, so let's go through our agenda a little bit. So what we're going to go through today is we have a session objective we'll review. Importance of KPIs, just a quick couple slides on that, some tips for KPIs. We'll go through the Kpi examples that we talked about, and then there's demo, which will be a good chunk of this session because it's really cool to see what Belinda has done with the dashboard. And then there's some resources at the end as well that you can go out and learn more about, included in the slide as well. Session objective. So today we're going to learn from our data. There's a lot of great data in BC and NAV that there isn't really any out-of-the-box reports or out-of-the-box dashboards that has a lot of it in there. So we're going to take a look at what are some of the things you can get to pretty easily on your own with Power BI. The other thing that we're going to look at is making sure you understand how to build dashboards using that data that's in Business Central. All right, so just a couple of things here. Importance of KPIs. KPIs give you great visibility to what is happening in your business. It allows you to measure what matters, and I can't stress this enough. Too many times I've been in customers' operations and asked, what do their reports look like? Like how many reports do they review on a monthly basis? And I actually had one customer say 300 reports. I'm pretty sure all 300 weren't getting reviewed on a daily basis. I don't know, Belinda, what's the highest number you've run into?
I don't think I've seen 300. I've not seen that. But I do want to point out. So I don't know what the highest is. I nowhere close to that. But I do want to point out we do have a tendency to try to build reports that support our beliefs. So we have to try to avoid that. We also have a tendency to look at reports that have always been there for us. And so we need to avoid that too. This is an opportunity to really dig in and find things. So what we really want to do is not only figure out what is the measure that is really going to help us run our business better, but also figure out what it is we don't know about our business.
And I think that's a great point. And I think that leads right into our next slide here, tips to create KPIs. So like you were saying, what is it that we really need to measure our business and what really matters? Because, I've been a lot of places where, they'll actually personally, this happened to me. I was running a report for the president of the company. It would take me, it was like a monthly report. When it got handed over to me from this other guy that had been doing it for 10 years, he was like, this is a very important report. The president relies on this every single month. He reviews it in detail and, it has to keep getting done. So I took it and I did it every month for a couple of months, like maybe 4 months. It took me about 2 or 3 hours to do. And then I noticed that nobody was really asking me questions about it or actually opening the report because the read receipt on the email never came back to me. So I just did an experiment and stopped doing it. And nobody ever asked me what happened to that report. So to your point, Belinda, it really is important to figure out what are those things that are important and, not just do it because you've always done that report. So at the end of the day, it's really important to figure out what it is that really matters and that you're going to be able to take action on.
That makes me think of two different things. So the first one, I want to go back to the person with 300 reports. If you only work 40 hours a week, there's only 2,080 hours a year. So if you spend an hour looking at every report, then you can only look at 10 months of data. And your time's up next year.
Yeah.
So that's crazy. So that start with 5 to 7. That's really good advice. But I want to add to that story you just told. I had an implementation I was doing. This was many years ago. We were taking someone off of an old mainframe system. That's how long ago it was. But they told me we can't go live until this report is correct and we have this report, and because we run our business off this report. And 2 months into it, I'm still trying to figure out why my report's not right. I mean, it was sporadically wrong. And then finally, I sat down with a calculator, and I tell the story a lot. It's really embarrassing to me that I didn't do that sooner. And it turns out the report they ran their business off of for 20 years was wrong. Wasn't wrong a lot. Wasn't wrong enough that it made them make bad decisions, but it still wasn't correct. And so it was embarrassing to me that I had never sat down with one. It was embarrassing to them that they insisted I match exactly to that report, and they had been using, and they made such a big deal of it, and it had been wrong all along, that we all kind of pretty much swept it under the rug and didn't talk about it again. But you really need to make sure, yeah, what else are you going to do? But you really
Yep.
need to make sure that you're looking at what's really important and what you're looking at is correct.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it leads into the next slide where we're just going to talk about some KPI examples. So what we did is we looked at BC and kind of, you know, over the years, what people have asked us for. So around vendors, a lot of the questions that people will have is my average lead time days correct by item by vendor? I can't tell you enough how this will come into play in so many other areas. I have been places where customers tell me, well, I think the lead time is 4 weeks. But then when you actually look at their data, well, it's really more like 5 weeks. So that can really throw off your purchasing, and they were wondering why they had a lot of back orders and, you know, weren't getting their sales orders out on time. Well, if stuff's not coming in the door when it's supposed to, it's not going to go out when it's supposed to. So average lead time days is a really good one to look at, be able to see what the trends are, and make adjustments if you need to. Another one is percent of orders delivered on time. You know, that one's a critical thing to just measuring how well is your vendor doing. Number of partial shipments versus complete shipments. This can come into play in a lot of areas. Number of returns by vendor by item. Again, you know, is it a good vendor? These are all things you can use to kind of measure that fact. Is this a vendor I should keep? Is it way more work to keep them than to maybe go out and find somebody who's going to deliver things on time, in full, and that has well-established lead times? Also looking at truck arrival times versus scheduled times. If you have something tracking when the truck arrives versus when it's scheduled, you can create a KPI around that. This is probably a session for another day, but a Power App is a good thing to use to build something to capture when maybe the trucks arrive and when they're scheduled to arrive. But again, that's another session for another day. And then also a checklist results from truck inspections. Again, another kind of Power App suggestion that might be a lot of fun.
So this is the list where I'm pulling the KPIs that will be on the upcoming video, where this is the one people voted on. And, you know, I have to say, I'm so excited that it was the vendors. I know you were rooting for them to vote for a warehouse, but I don't think enough people pay attention to how a vendor affects their company. And that's critical because it's your supplies. I mean, vendors need to be treated with the same kit gloves as customers.
Yep. Yeah, and I think you actually bring up a really good point, because if it is one of the areas I like to look at, especially if somebody's telling me that they're having a hard time getting things out the door. You know, instead of focusing on the warehouse, a lot of times I do like to ask, what are the types of issues they're having with their vendors? Because a lot of times if stuff's not going out on time out of the warehouse, well, if it didn't come in right, or we're not counting, or we're, you know, things are consistently back ordered, it's gonna affect how it goes out the door. And I think a lot of people forget that the two are connected. So I actually am pretty excited about this one.
And if you have to have a lot of returns for a particular vendor, then that's not a good thing, because it's really giving you a bad reputation with your customers if they have to keep returning items.
Yep. All right. So let's do this. I love this picture.
Yep, that was us in 3rd grade when we started learning.
Exactly. I was already programming computers by then.
There you go. That was the look you made when you realized that you had left a comma out.
Exactly.
Okay, so I want to show you the download that you have available to you so that you can create this hands-on experience. Our plan for the session initially was to let people actually build, and we would just help guide them. But since, you know, coronavirus got in the way, we just thought, well, we'll build this little PowerPoint deck for you. So the PDF of it should be available for you so you could have that hands-on experience. And forgive me for being lazy and just clicking down the sides here. So I want to start out by web services. So I'm going to show you how this handout works as well. So you have the steps 1 and 2, you look for the 1, you'll look for the 2, you should be good to go. All right, so when you are using Power BI, and we're specifically talking about using BC in the cloud here, you're going to want to use web services to connect to your data, and then you're going to want to use the connector inside of Power BI, the online connector, to connect to those web services. Don't try to use the OData links that are available to you. It really is optimized if you use the online services, and you'll see that in a moment. But if you've never set up web services before, you would go just do a lookup and look for web, and then you'll find web services. At that point, this is where the list of existing web services are, and you can create your own web service. Now, for this particular report that I'm going to show you, we're going to connect to 3 web services. The first one we're going to connect to, so you just click on plus, you would go, we're going to add a page, which is going to be a list in BC. And we're going to add item number 50. That's where you see the 3. And then it automatically is named purchase order. And then what we'll do is we'll call it Summit purchase order for the purpose of this, just so you could see it work out. And then you want to make sure where number 5 is that you publish it. You also might want to publish to the left of it and make it available for all tenants. Then up at the top where 6 is, I want to point out it is not saved until that says saved. So you might just click on another line and then it should read saved. In this screenshot, you can see it was indeed saved. Then you're going to add 2 more for the purpose of this report. And I'll show you the report in just a moment. And that is the posted warehouse receipts and the posted warehouse receipts lines. And I name those also Summit posted warehouse receipts line and Summit posted warehouse receipts. And I did that because I want to be able to just show everything in easily by which ones have Summit in front of them. Now, this is the report we're going to build, the percent of orders delivered on time by a vendor. So I could see all of my vendor IDs, my vendors, and how many orders were received on time, how many were late, how many total receipts there were, and what the percent of on time is. And I even have a barcode there. So I could say, just show me the late ones, or I could say, go in and show me just the ones from Kim. So I could take a look and figure out what's going on. So this is what we're going to be building. All right, so back to our slides here. So I even show you how I put the background on Power BI. If you've never done that before, I have a JPEG that I created. You don't have to actually do that if you don't want to, but I do have a JPEG there. And you would just go to the paint roller and insert it and set the transparency to 0 and then fit it in as a whole. So you got this nice background on your report. Then you want to connect to your services. So I went to get data up at the top, I went to online services, and I chose Business Central. And then I clicked on connect. And at that point, I could select which online service I wanted. Now, oh, I think I skipped something there. Where did it go? Oh, my whole get data is right there. Okay. All right, so there is my Business Central connection. After I connect, it's going to prompt me to sign in. If you've signed in before, you don't have to sign in again. It will remember your login credentials. But it did prompt me to sign in, so I click on connect. At that point, I can search for where 1 is my environment that I want. I went to the sandbox here. Number 2 is selecting the specific company. And then number 3, since I started all of mine with Summit, I just typed in Summit in the search, and now only the Summit web services are appearing. And what's appearing is the service name that I manually entered in, and that you can't have spaces in there. So by putting Summit in, it did make it easier to find them all. So I wanted to point out that because I selected purchase order, and that was one that was already in the box, it created a purchase order line for me. It doesn't always create the line. In the case of the warehouse receipts, it did not create the line, but it did in the case of purchase order. And this is really powerful. We're going to take advantage of it now.
Yeah, and I think, Belinda, for me, and working with BC and working with Power BI, this is really exciting. And I know, especially if you're not as familiar with the database, having it do this for you makes it really easy for kind of that beginner that's just starting out. And then you kind of get a feel for the different tables that relate together. So this is a really cool thing. Now I'm showing how much of a nerd I am, but yeah, this was really exciting to see.
You're right. For people like us, it's a holy cow moment. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
wow, that is so stinking cool. I can't even stress that. So that's why it's bright yellow as well. And I should point out that when you have one highlighted on the left, you can see a preview of the data on the right to ensure that you're in the right space. And then we have I click on transform data, which takes me to the query editor, so I can begin doing some data modeling. Now, I'm only walking through a bit of data modeling to achieve our results here, but when you're connecting to the data, you have over on the left, you have your data pane, which is where the one is. We have our query settings pane on the right, and then we can see our data in the middle. Now, let me come over here. I have what I call Belinda's 3 rules to data modeling, and we'll go through some of those as we go through. But one of them is that I like to remove any column I think I don't need. So what I did is I selected the purchase order column here, and then I went up to choose columns where number 2 is, and normally that'll be lit up if you haven't already selected it. It's only dimmed out in the screenshot because I've selected it already. And then this choose column window is opened up. And then you could see I unselect all and then select the ones I want. So you can see I've selected a couple of fields here. I scrolled down, I selected, then at the bottom, Summit purchase order purchase lines, and that was that other web services that got created for me automatically. And so I didn't have to even create that. I only created the purchase order and it created for me. And the fact now that I have linked in here this piece of data, this web service, is pretty cool. Then I go ahead and click on OK. And then now I start working on some of Belinda's 3 rules. But one of them I'm doing here is there's the no field. I call it no because every time I see it, I scream no. No is the number. In this case, for the purchase order, it's the purchase order number. So I do encourage you, anytime you see no, that you go ahead and rename it to what it really is. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a lot of variations of no.
And Belinda, just so you know, that really is really annoying to all of us in the NAB BC world as well. Like the number of times, well, now I just said number, but the amount of times it's used that no is used versus item number or sales order number, etc. Yeah, we hate it too.
Totally get that. And because we're dealing with one web service piece at a time, it's easy to go ahead and rename them as we go along. So by all means, go ahead and rename it to something that makes sense. One of the cool things about the way Microsoft has done BC and web services is they've taken the field name, so they're not something that, you know, like VN, I don't know that that's really it, but it, you know, that could be the name of it, and they made it something that is logical to citizen developers. So I just encourage you to go ahead and set that as well. And technically, if you look at the screen in BC that this data represents, the PO number is literally called, that field is called no. So you know what it is. And I should really call it number, but it makes me crazy. So I scream no every time I see it. And thank you for making me feel better about that, Kim, because that seems to be the only thing that really is making me crazy about BC. I love BC other than that, so very cool. All right, so I also, I just collapsed the query pane over here. You don't have to do that so that you can see a better screenshot. The purchase order lines column that I chose to add, you notice every field in there says table, and there's this double-headed arrow. So I want you to click on the double-headed arrow next, and then you get another expansion area. That's what that double-headed arrow is. It's an expand option. So I could select fields inside of the purchase order line items. Now, what's interesting is right now I have 22 rows. You can see that down at the bottom, because I have 22 purchase orders. And when I select the lines and then click OK, I'm now going to have a separate row for every line item on the purchase order. So it's going to go from 22 purchase orders to however many lines I have. So I added a couple of more fields here and kept scrolling down, and then added the requested receipt date and click OK. And now here's where we go from 22 to 60 using the exact same query. So that is my data here. So what I wanted to do On this one, again, we have the no right here. So I changed that to the number means item. So I left the no there because I want you to be able to look at the line item, and that line item would say no, and that way you know it's a related thing, but you can name it again whatever you want. And it does help eliminate confusions, because otherwise we would have ended up with no for the purchase order and no.1 for the line item. So this makes it a whole lot more sense for us. Then I'm going to scroll down again. So one of Belinda's 2 rules also, well, I've shown you one actually, and that was remove the columns you don't need. It's far too easy to go back and add columns later. So if you think you don't need it, get rid of it. I always tell people build your data model for the most technologically improficient person in the company. That's a nice way of saying what I used to say, which is the dumbest person of the company, but we need to all be a little more PR. So I am going to say the most technologically improficient person in the company. And actually, you should make that person your friend, because if you can make it where they can easily navigate and interact with reports, then everyone should be able to do that. So they are a good tester for you. But rule number 3 is you want to change the data types to something that will make the data act the way you want it to act. So setting a data type in the query editor is not about how it will look, but how it will act. So in this particular case, I'm taking the line item and I'm going to turn it from a number to text. And the reason I'm going to do that is I need to create a unique column for every row on here. So I'm going to take a combination of the PO number and the line item to create this unique index, if you will, so I can merge columns together. So I'm setting that to text. So now it's set to text. Great. So what I'm going to do to create this index is I'm going to first go up to add column, and then I'm going to click on highlight the purchase order column, hold the control key down, highlight the line number column, and then I'm going to click on merge columns up here. And then what it'll do is it'll actually create for me this window will pop up asking me what name do I want, and do I want it to separate it all. I'm going to let it be one long string of characters. So I'll give it a name, PO number and line item, and then click OK. And then now I have that new column that exists. So now what I'm going to do is go up to my warehouse receipts and do some data modeling here as well. So all I'm going to do on this one is just go in and remove unnecessary columns. And so that's all I'm going to do. I go up to that choose columns and deal with that. And then I go to the purchase or the posted warehouse receipts line. I'm going to do the same thing and select columns. I've got the list of columns over here so you could see which ones I have. And then I'm going to create that same PO and line number field that I created in purchase order so I can merge those together. So first I need to go in and make the line item be text. That's the only way I can create a new field that has both the PO and the text field. So I'm doing this on the source line item. In this case, the source number is the purchase order. So the number here is the receipt number, and the source number is the PO number. And then the source line item then is the purchase order line item, and the regular line item is the receipt line item, which is why you really want to change names. So line item is like the no as well. The line number, probably want to monitor that. So now I have this new source line right here, and so that's how that all works together. I created that new column. And then now what I'm going to do is merge these columns together. So I'm just going to take the receipts line, and then I'm going to go up and click on the drop-down arrow for merge. And then I'm going to create a new query, merge as new. And this is where I'm going to take the receipts line and the PO line and merge. Oh, actually, sorry, I got ahead of myself. I'm going to first merge the warehouse receipts with the warehouse receipts line. Now remember, purchase order did that for me automatically. And so when purchase order did that, it was already, all I had to do is expand the lines. In this particular case, I'm having to merge them together. So I'm just going to take the receipt lines and add in unique information about the receipt itself from like the header line. So I match these up. I'm going to grab the receipt line right here and the no and the no and put those together. And I'm going to do a left outer join, which is one of the things that happens automatically. So it's telling me all the receipt lines from the rows in the receipt lines are matched up, 47 out of 47 are matched up to the header of that, which is the way it should be. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. So just kind of walking through this, I now end up with this new merge query. So I've given you two of Belinda's three rules, and the funny thing is I gave them to you as number 2 and number 3. The number 1 is that you name your query to something that makes sense. Now we're not going to be using these summit queries, we're going to use this new merge query. So over here on the right, where the 2 is, I just rename it, and after I press return, this merge will be renamed to received POs. And that's something that'll make sense too. I usually call that technologically improficient person grandma because I'm a grandma and I don't think I'm technologically improficient, so I don't take offense to it. So that's how the persona I use. So if you hear me say grandma, I'm talking about that individual. All right, so now I'm gonna take this new query, purchased received PO items, and I'm going to go back up and click on merge. And I'm not going to do merge as new. I'm just going to add the purchase order lines to this query. So I can see my purchase order lines right here. And then I'm going to select that I want to bring in summit purchase order. And now I'm going to match up these two custom columns that I created. And then I'm still using that left outer joins, all from the POs and then received POs and only the purchase orders that match up. Now, what you're going to notice here is this time I only have 46 that are matching, and I'll explain that in just a few. And then I go ahead and click on OK. Now what I end up with is something that on the received POs, something that looks like this. So I brought in my warehouse receipts. It's all as table. The line items are the receipts, the header information, and I have my POs. So I'm just going to go through and do expansions on those. And I'm going to grab everything except for that no field because I've already cleaned it up. And then this one, I'm going to get a little more selective on the PO. And so now I have all new columns. And so everything is merged into this received PO. So now I no longer need these 3 headers, the ones that start with, or queries, the ones that start with summit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use them for refreshing, but I'm not going to bring the data in. Otherwise, my data would be duplicated. Because if you recall, what I've actually done is taken all the data that these 3 pull in and merged them into a single query down here. So I'm going to right mouse click on each one of these queries, choose enable load where the 2 is, and then I get a warning where 3 is, that if I've used it on any kind of visuals, I might be breaking them by removing that. And I didn't use them, so that's okay. And I'm going to do that for all 3 of those. And you notice that as I do that, they start becoming italicized, and that's an indication that they're not included in the data set, even though they are used in, if I come back up here, even though they are included in the report refresh. So now that I come down here, the only one that I've used is that I'm using is the received POs. And now I want to do a little bit more cleanup from here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll to the last column here. And I notice that the requested receipt date on some of these is 110001. That means no requested receipt date was entered. And we're going to be using this as when we expect to receive our goods. And you could use whatever date column it is, but this is the date we're asking our vendors to provide the goods to us. And so sometimes we haven't populated it. Maybe that is user error, or maybe it's that we really don't have a required date for it to be here. But we need to do something, because when we look at the difference between the date received and this date, we don't want it to look at it as if it was year 1. So we need to do something here. So what we're going to do is right mouse click on this date and choose replace values. And this is like find and replace in Excel. And then you could go in and put in the date 110001 and replace it with null. So we're not actually changing the data in here line by line. Instead, we're using commands, and these commands get stored in these applied steps. So they're repeatable. So every time I refresh, it goes through all these applied steps. Now I'm going through and adding a custom column. So I just clicked on add column, add custom column. Again, it won't be dimmed if you haven't already clicked on it. And then you get this custom column window listed right here. Once you do that, I'm going to create a formula or a brand new column that shows me how many days early it is. Now, this window writes in the M language, which stands for mashup, M for mashup, another language to learn. So I always say, Kim, you know, between M and there's DAX, we're going to be doing a little bit of DAX too. And then, you know, there's T-SQL and all these other languages. The next language Microsoft has will be Functional Universal, or FU. And so I tell them that all the time. And actually, I even tell Microsoft directly, and you could tell how good the sense of humor is between which ones laugh and which ones don't. But what I've done here is on the right, this is just like adding a column on a pivot table in Excel. I've selected the requested receipt date and either double click on it, or you could highlight it and then click on insert, minus the posting date. Now I put spaces around on each side of the minus, but that's not necessary. I did that to make it easier for you to see. I have no syntax errors, so that doesn't mean the formula will be exactly right, but it'll be close. And I want to point out that some of these are null now because we did that find and replace. You can see the nulls. Then you go ahead and click on OK. At that point, Power BI hasn't had the opportunity to try to figure out what the data type is for this brand new column. Now, this is the duration. The number of days is what we're looking for. And if you look at the column behind it, it's separated into 4 separate numbers, separated by colons. So that's day, hour, minutes, and second. We're only interested in day, so we're going to change it from this duration, which we could use right here, to a whole number. So that way we're only looking at the days. So let me scroll down on my slides here. All right, so once we do that, we have some that still have nulls, perhaps. So we're going to go in and do a replace value here. So when I do this, I'm going to take the null and replace the null with a 0, because now this column is a whole number. So for the nulls, meaning the requested ship date was null to begin with, then we want to replace that with a 0. So it wasn't late at all. Then what we could do, come and add another column, add column, but this time we're going to choose conditional column, so we could do an if statement. And now what we're going to do is we're going to name the new column delivery status, and then on the if, we'll do a lookup to find the column days delivered early that we just created. We're going to say if it's less than 0, it's late, meaning it's, you know, it came after we requested it. Otherwise, it's on time. So we entered the word late, we entered the words on time, and we actually entered the 0 in as well. Days delivered early is the only place we looked for a column. And if you end up needing more of an if statement, if it's if this, then if it's this, then you could keep adding the if clauses and then end up with an else down at the bottom. And then I click OK, and now I have this new column on time. Again, it doesn't know what kind of field it is, so I'm going to quickly make it a text field. All right, now that I've got that done, my data modeling inside the query editor is complete. So I'm going to click on the Home tab and then click on the Close and Apply icon. And what this is going to do is it's going to take the end result of my data and it's going to put it into the Power BI in-memory data model. And it'll that way I'm not getting all the data, I'm only getting the data for the received PO. So here I am in Power BI again, and you can see I only have one query, and it is received PO, and it has all the fields, which include both warehouse receipts, warehouse line, I guess both, warehouse receipts and line items, and purchase orders with line items. Great. So now I'm going to go in and start adding in some DAX formulas. So I'm going to add in one called measure, where I wanted to count how many of the purchase orders were arrived late. So I'm going to go up, and at this point I would go to the let's see. We're going to go in. I think I missed one. Yeah, that's why. Okay. I should have gone to talked this out. We're going to go to the modeling tab, and then we're going to click on new measure. And so once you do that, and again, you need to be on a newer version of Power BI to have these exactly the way they are. They made a change to the way the user interface looks a couple of months ago. So if you're on an older version, it might not, some of the columns and ribbons might not match up the same, but all the same features are there. So we get this formula bar right here, and I have an insert of it. Everything to the left of the equals is the name of the new column we're creating, or the new measure. Measure is just going to be a formula that we write in DAX. So the name of the measure will be to the left, and everything to the right of the equals is actually the formula itself. And so what we're going to do to figure out how many of these are late, we're going to I have a video here where I could show you how this is done, but here's the late calculation. So I've used, this is a pretty complex formula in DAX. So I've done a calculate and I said, all right, just do the distinct count for all of the warehouse receipts that have a delivery status of late. And remember, that was that custom field I added. So it's going to only count it if it is late. And so that's why it's a little more complex. That's the calculate function. And then I'm going to do the same thing for on time, only count it if it's on time. This is case sensitive. Everything on here is case sensitive in DAX. And then you can see you need to make sure you enter these text fields exactly as you entered them in the formula. Then I created one more measure, and this measure is the total receipt. So I'm just adding up the late and the on time ones together to get a total. So once I do that, I want to get the percent of the ones that are late. So I'm going to do one more measure. And this time I'm going to go through and say, all right, divide the on time calculations that by the total receipts. And if there's zero, meaning the divide by or the total receipts is zero, then put zero in the percent. That's the same thing as doing an if error, if you will. And so now on the report, we're ready to start populating our calculations, our visuals, if you will. And one of the visuals is going to be the name of the order itself, or the name of the report, the title on the report. So I simply click on insert and I go to text and I'll write in % of online delivery. I'll just stretch it out into the zone that I'm looking in. And then just to make the background clear, I'll turn the background off in the visualization for that, in the visualization pane. Now, what I'm ready to do is come in and add in the next piece. So I click off that visual. So I just click anywhere on the report. Notice I don't have handlebar selected there, but I do have handlebars or frame selected on that. This is the one that the focus is on, or the title. When I click somewhere else, the title is off the focus. And even the visualization pane changes. So you can see the difference. When this is selected, I don't see all of the visualization options because it's text, and now I do. So I'm going to select the matrix option, which is similar to a pivot table in Excel. So here it is. I'll just stretch it out a little bit, and now I need to populate my fields. So I have rows that I'm going to populate, and I have values that I'm going to populate, just like you would inside of a pivot table. So to populate it, you're just going to drag fields over into the row area and drop it. So that's how you get those in. So here is what I've added into my visual. I've added buy from vendor number. So I'm getting the vendor ID or the vendor number, the vendor name. I'm getting the source document, which is the purchase order number. And then just for fun, I added the shelf number, and then I added in the posting date. Then in the values I've added, is it on time? Is it late? The total receipts and the total on time. These are the measures that I created. So it's just a formula that gets calculated at the time I use it. And you can see how this is laid out right here on the screen to the left on the visual. Now I still have my handlebars or my focus on this visual. So I went in and just turned the background off so it would look a little bit better. But there's some other things I want to do to it as well, because I can't see all of my fields in my row. So while I'm still on the format option, the paintbrush, I have this selected, I'm on the paintbrush. I'll open up row headers and turn off step layout. And so that's the first thing I'm going to do. The second thing I'm going to do is go to subtotals and turn off row subtotals. And then now I basically have the same thing as if you'd gone into a pivot table in Excel and turned it into tabular and turned off the subtotals. And then I'm using the expand down to keep expanding down until I can see the vendor name. And now I can see the number of on-time POs and the number of late POs and the total receipts. So as I keep going down, I want to do some filtering. You remember one of those merges we made, it only merged on 46 of the 47. That's because the warehouse receipts also had a sales return order. So I could have handled this, and probably should have, inside of the query editor, but instead what I did is I drug out the source document into my filter column, and I just am doing a basic filter and unselecting the sales return orders. Likewise, you could have also gone in and changed it where you could have manually entered in that you only want to see purchase orders. So now I'm only looking at my purchase orders. A couple other things I want to do. I want to do some formatting. So I'm taking this percent over here and I'm just highlighting it. It automatically opens up my measure tools. And then what I could do here is format this as a percent so it will show up as a percent. And I want to point out one thing. I had my measure wrong initially, or one of my fields wrong. So I fixed it so you could see there was 100% everywhere there. The slide's correct. All the slides are correct except for the background showing up until here. All right. Now that I've got that done, I want to do some conditional formatting here just so I could show you a little more. So what I'm going to do with my handlebar still on this matrix, I'm going to come over to the on time percent, click on the drop down list, choose conditional formatting, and then choose data bars. Once I do that, I get this data bar area here, and you could pick the color you want for positive and left, and then go ahead and, or negative, and click OK. And then when I come in, I can now see my data bar color, so I can see the data bars. And then now I want to add some slicers in so that it works a little more interactively. So I'm just going to come and add a slicer visual here. I'm going to drag the delivery status in so I can see if it's late or on time. And then I'll do the same for the purchase code. And then we end up with the final results here. And let's take a look at this report again. So here I've changed the color to blue, but here are the final reports. And this time, instead of using posting date, which I think I had here, no, I had purchaser. Let me pull this back up. I changed it to assigned to user. And normally I would change the column names to all the things that make sense, but I wanted to leave them the same for you guys on this so that you could get the experience. But you could put basically anything you want in here. I'm gonna close up the filter and then drag this field over. So right here, you could put basically anything. We could put document status, whoops, and then let me get rid of document status. So all those are completely put away. So anything that you want, you could put in this field. I'm going to drag bin in and get rid of document status. And what this, the way you saw it, one of the things that we have here is if I have bin code, if I also come in and put location code above it, I now have this hierarchy that I could use. So I could select the location code and go down the bin code. So this is the report that I'm walking you through building. So you look for these slides. There are 84 of them. The DAX one does include a slide with a video on it. So don't do like I do. Every time I look at it, I'm like, why did I put a blank slide in here? And it is actually a video. If I go back to that slide, DAX. Oh, I think that was it right there. And yeah, this video, you should know it says this video. So down at the bottom, when you go over it, you should be able to play it. And it is not too long of a video where you can watch me going through all the steps of building it. So I'm not just giving you the screenshots on that one, because that one is a little more advanced, but you could actually see me building it. You could see it uses IntelliSense so that you could follow and select from the IntelliSense, which is what I do. So I'm going to go ahead and just stop that. You can see it's not a long slide. And Kim, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
There's a couple more KPI examples that we have for you. So some warehouse KPIs that you might want to consider tracking are cycle counts. So the number of cycle counts per day, number of adjustments, total number of counts versus number of adjustments, sales orders. This is a helpful one too, especially when you're trying to manage what you're doing out in the warehouse. There's a couple of activity cues you can use for this, but not one kind of dashboard where you can see everything clearly. So there's some things that you might want to measure there. And then some more KPIs for the warehouse: shipping and picking dashboard, a purchasing and put away dashboard. So you can kind of go through those and take a look at those. And I think the important thing is that everything that Belinda's shown you in relationship to the vendor, you can apply the same principles. It's just different tables that you would be using. Then I think we have the just the lead time and DAX calculation, so you can see it there. And these are the list of BC web services that were used and the ones that Belinda created. I don't know if you want to add anything there, Belinda.
Yeah, these are a lot of the ones that we used when we were creating KPIs for all of the other, some of the other examples. And this was partly when we were going to do the full class where everybody could pick and choose a particular application. So these are all ones, if you're looking at warehousing, that you really want to pay attention to. So these are ones that are going to really help you figure out what you want to get. So it's a good list for you. Some of them are out of the box, so you'll notice that some of them are highlighted and some of them have dashes. You recall that 51 that we didn't have selected there. We created our own, but that one is pretty cool because that was the one that gave us that extra lines. But yeah, so these are the ones that you would definitely want to pay attention to.
And then this is just kind of a helpful diagram so you can kind of see the relationships between the different tables, you know, as you start thinking about and planning your different dashboards. You know, you can see how everything relates together. And there are some different resources. Here are some different resources listed that you can go out and look at. Docs.microsoft.com is a really good place to find a lot of great information. So be sure to check those out. And that is it for us. So thanks everyone for watching. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to send them to our email.